The Chinese Communist Party is at war with the United States. They're not competitors. And they've stated this. They seem to be following this doctrine called unrestricted warfare, which the first rule is there are no rules. And the second rule is everything's a battlefield. This unseen hand is pushing these things, which are destroying culture and harmonizing the world into a communist mentality. If there's a pandemic treaty and then they declare a global health emergency, we automatically go into these One Health-based rules and regulations and laws, if you will, that completely subverts our constitutions, our sovereign systems of governance. You've never had this kind of power in one body before. Now that we know the control that the Chinese Communist Party has over the WHO and its member countries, it's almost like China is pre-installing the government that will be there when they waltz in and become the global hegemon.
Welcome to the Staying Free podcast. In this episode, I spoke with Brian O'Shea. Brian is an intelligence specialist with a background in strategic military intel, enterprise intelligence architecture, and competitive intelligence. He provides expertise in foreign internal defense to communities across the United States, and also has a column with the Daily Clout, where he's an outspoken commentator on world affairs. So when I first reached out to Brian to come on the podcast, I actually didn't know too much about his background. But when he sent me over some information about his expertise, giving me ideas of some angles that we could go with the conversation, I realized that he has quite an outstanding resume for all the kind of things that he talks about. He really is an expert in his field. So this episode definitely gets into the weeds of geopolitics, which I find very, very interesting, and especially so with this episode where I was able to draw on Brian's very unique and informed perspective. So I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. If you do like the episode, please give it a like and a share on social media. If you're enjoying the podcast so far, make sure you give it a 5-star rating in whichever podcast app you're using. If you're new here, welcome. Do give the pod a subscribe for future episodes. And just a quick mention here that the podcast is going to be going audio only for the foreseeable future until I get myself up to speed on a censorship-free video platform. I had my last episode with Karen Harradine pulled from YouTube simply because she mentioned the word toxic vaccine on one occasion throughout the entire podcast. So that's how ridiculous YouTube is these days with its censorship. So I've decided I'm not going to put my episodes there at all anymore. I might put trailers there just so that people who like to subscribe on YouTube know when an episode has been released. But I definitely won't be uploading any more videos. So I'll be moving probably to Rumble going forward, but it is going to take a little bit of time to get my episodes on there. So just a side note there. As always, if you want to support me, then there are links to how you can do that in the description. And once again, a new way to support me is by checking out the affiliate links. The first one on there is for Surfshark VPN, which is a personal favorite of mine. And at the moment, they've got an amazing deal with 82% off and the first 2 months free. And Surfshark is already one of the most price competitive VPNs on the market. So if you don't already have a VPN or you're looking to switch, you should definitely consider Surfshark. And please do use my affiliate link as well so you can support my content at the same time. As always, any support you're able to give me is hugely appreciated. All right, that's enough for the intro. Let's get into the episode. Brian, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I've been doing a lot of research on you before having this conversation and looking at kind of some of the interviews that you've been doing and everything like that. So, I've got so many things that I want to kind of get into and talk to you about today. I know that you have a lot of areas of expertise. But first of all, before I do you want to just give my listeners a little bit of an intro and a background as to yourself?
Oh, sure. Well, my name is Brian O'Shea, and very happy to be here. My background is I spent pretty much all of my adult life in some intelligence discipline or another, 11 years in military intelligence, mainly in 2 special forces groups. After that, I was in government intelligence in the Fort Meade and Langley areas, and did that for another 12 years, I believe. And then I got into private competitive intelligence, which is companies legally spying on each other. So I worked for companies in big pharma, defense, finance, private family, banking. And then I took all these skill sets and put them into my own company, first as an investigations company called Stryker Pierce, and then we were bought up by Centurion Intelligence Partners, where I'm currently the COO, providing all manner of intelligence, private intelligence services to our clients.
Cool. And now you are also a writer at the Daily Clout, or you do more than that? I know that Naomi Wolf, who runs that, is your wife. So what's your kind of, what is it you're involved in there?
Oh, so I was looking at all of these things from the get-go, from the beginning of the pandemic, and she invited me to start a column with what I was finding. So yes, I'm a writer, investigative journalist, I guess you'd say, and the name of the column is mostly Peaceful, where we take the headlines and we go behind them and we really break them down and what they really mean.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it sounds like your background is like very, very targeted towards this kind of stuff. It sounds like you're a good person to have on the side of freedom with given everything you've been involved in. So how did you get into all that stuff, first of all, like intelligence and everything like that? Like I was interested to hear how you get into that kind of work.
Well, I think it's a typical, little boy wanting to be a spy story. Growing up, I had 6 brothers. We were always playing military games against each other, just, like most kids do with the cap guns and all that. And then that got boring. So we started kind of like figuring out how to use camouflage. And then, as I got older, into my teens, I saw my first Tom Clancy movie. I think it was Patriot Games. And started reading those books. And I was like, man, this is what I want to do. This is cool as hell. And so I joined the military, and I told I had some good scholarships. And my mom was heartbroken when I said I wanted to join the military. Many of my brothers had, but she was hoping I'd go right to college. And I had a couple scholarships, like I said. And so I talked to my Latin teacher, and he said, well, if you're going to go into the military, go into the Defense Language Institute if you can get in. So I took a test, got in, and that set my path forward on the intelligence world. So 2 years of Arabic training led to electronic warfare training, signals intelligence, tactical intelligence. And then in the military, in the Army, you have the freedom to kind of go to pick your unit every time you re-enlist. So as soon as I could, I went from the 101st, the historical 101st Airborne Division, to 5th Special Forces. And from there, it really just, I don't want to say I was living the dream, but I did love it. And I loved being in the military and, in Special Forces units. And I supported the Green Berets. I was not a Green Beret. So we supported them. So I always say heavier rucksacks and not all the glory. And we supported them, and it really gave me a good scope of the different disciplines of intelligence, the different levels, strategic, tactical. And what was nice about Special Forces is we're in with the people in the countries we're working with. So you really, really got to really submerge yourself in the culture and everything like that. And then I did that in the Middle East, and then I went to another group and I did that in Southeast Asia.
Wow, okay. Did you say it was the Defense Language Institute? Is that
in Monterey, California.
That was what you were advised to go into by this
my Latin teacher, yeah. Thank God.
What is that? What is that, and why did he encourage it?
Well, he encouraged it because he saw that I had the capability to do a lot with my mind, my brain. And there's nothing wrong with being infantry or anything else. I mean, those are all very smart people too. But he was a bit of a mentor, and he kind of advised, like, I think you'd be happiest based on what I told him I wanted to do in the fields of intelligence. And so he recommended Defense Language Institute because it's a guarantee. I mean, if you pass the test to get into the military really high, which I maxed, and then I maxed the Defense Language Aptitude Battery test. So I was chosen for Arabic because at the time, this is about 91, 92, Desert Storm, Desert Shield had just ended. And so the School of the Middle East in the Presidio of Monterey in California, that was like a huge thing. And so for 2 years, you get out of basic training and then you go to Defense Language Institute for 8 hours a day. You're just learning language, the language you're assigned to. That's all you do all day long. You're wearing a uniform. But it's like being in college in uniform.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. So basically, defense language is just learning a foreign language and then applying it for defense purposes, essentially.
Yeah, it's an add-on skill. So my core skill or job was intelligence analyst, and starting as a signals intelligence analyst. But I had a language. So analysts don't need a language, but I had one. Whereas collectors and interrogators, they have to have a language. Mine ended up being an add-on. And the funny thing about it was, with that and the additional intelligence training, by the time I was done training, I only had 1 year left on my enlistment. So I spent 3 years training and I had 1 year left. But of course I re-enlisted because I wanted to go do things.
Right. Okay. So at that time, presumably you felt very patriotic about, the country and wanting to kind of do things for the country. Did you have any doubts in your mind as to did you ever doubt, am I on the right side here, or have any doubts in that? Or were you always just like, no, everything we're doing is for a good cause? Were you in any way, I guess, of a kind of conspiracy theorist at that time, or had any doubts about that? Or you were very, very just on board with it?
No, I mean, I would say not really. And to be quite honest, I can honestly say, I mean, I was very young. So I was doing it less for patriotism and more for this is really cool and it's an adventure, which it was. And so, no, I never had doubts until Operation Enduring Freedom. And I was deployed to the southern Philippines right after the 9/11 attacks with 1st Special Forces. And I started noticing things then, like, certain companies had set up ATMs already and cash machines for the soldiers. And of course, you don't really need cash because you're in Zamboanga. But they made us take out money like once a week, so that way the provider of the ATM could make their fees. Or we started noticing the food was terrible. That was government contracted. So we would buy locally, and then they forced us, they just started taking the meal out of our paycheck, whether we ate or not. And that's when I really started having doubts. And that's around the time I decided, okay, I think I'm all done here. That and the fact that I got stop lossed after 10 years, suddenly it looked like I couldn't get out for a while, which I ended up getting out. But that's when I think I started not really having conspiracy theories, more like, okay, I saw the kind of gross business side of it, and I didn't like that.
I see. Okay, so just briefly, what actually is Operation Enduring Freedom? I don't know about that operation specifically.
That was the name of the global war on terror.
Was it? Okay, right.
And in hindsight, I would warn anyone that anytime a war has an ambiguous title, don't wave your pom poms, because how does a global war on terror or fighting for democracy, does that ever end? It doesn't have to if they don't want it to.
Yeah, I mean it makes absolutely no sense as well. I kind of think that with all of these things, actually thinking about it now, I'm sure we'll get into this, but there's a lot of kind of like inversion going on. And I talk about this a lot in the podcast, where you have something which is purportedly named one thing, but it's actually the polar opposite of that thing. And you think about something like Operation Enduring Freedom. Well, what's it about? It's about, dispossessing people of their freedoms, things like the Patriot Act. What's it about? It's the most anti-patriotic thing you could possibly do. It's basically just the dismantlement of the Constitution. These things all started, I think, around that time, especially around 9/11. I remember even when I was young, around the time of 9/11, I think, I can't remember exactly how old I was at the time, but I remember when, in the aftermath of that, the Patriot Act kind of coming about. And I just thought, this is just absolutely like crazy. This is, this is the kind of death knell of, what we traditionally thought of law and order and, proper freedom and proper kind of, due process, etc. Yeah. So yeah, I guess, sorry, here, go on.
Oh no, I was going to jump in there and say, and this is, I think, what you don't hear a lot. So for me, after 2003, I went right into the intelligence world on the government side as a contractor. And we didn't feel that way. And this really talks to those questions a lot of people have about how can people at CDC do what they're doing or NIH do what they're doing. And I can honestly say that when you're in that world of government work and you've been there for a long time, you don't feel the same attachment to the rest of the world as the people that are in it. So for instance, when I would leave work and drive down through Arlington, Virginia, or DC where I lived, the people out there, they seemed like avatars to me. Like they didn't seem like I didn't feel part of that community, even though I lived in that community, because I had a whole other community that kind of encompassed my whole life. And it wasn't really until I spent some time contracting, and by contracting, I mean, I was just augmenting the workforce. I was doing the same work, same clearance, everything. But then when I got out, I realized, oh, wait a minute, this is not good. We had no idea on the inside what's really going on. And I'm not trying to exonerate anyone, but I can say there is a real detachment mentality within government, the government workforce from, the citizenry.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. But at the time, you weren't aware of that until kind of starting to kind of move away from that community.
Well, it helped me do my job. I was like, of course, there's bad terrorists out there, and it's great to have more as an intel person. That's more intel. But then you start thinking, well, wait a minute, this can be turned on me as well, which. That's what they do. I mean, in the intelligence community, you do start getting accused. I wasn't accused of anything, but you start getting accused of things by your own employers simply so they can reduce the workforce. And my argument to that was like, well, just fire us. I mean, like you don't have to, attack contractors and get just to reduce your workforce now that Osama bin Laden is dead, just end the contract. So they do this weird culling, and they use those things against us or against everyone.
Wow, that's strange. I never heard that before. It seems like a very, I don't know, a culture that you just wouldn't know about any of these things being outside of it. But just on what you were mentioning there with the what was going on with the ATMs, I didn't quite understand what actually was going on there. Was it that they were bringing in American banks into these places to start installing their infrastructure?
More like contra. Yeah, I mean the banks, of course, but no, there's these subcontracts that go with every deployment. So there's food, there's logistics, there's everything. Drivers sometimes, and dry cleaning. And so what would happen is they bring in all these things. Like for instance, in the Green Zone, they had like Subway and all these franchises out in Iraq. And what happened in the Philippines, and I can't speak for Iraq because I was across the pond there, but they made us use them so that way that contracting firm could make their money. So obviously there was some lobbying going on saying, hey, why aren't the soldiers using the ATMs? You better make sure they use them or, we won't fund your campaign. Who knows? But that's what it felt like. And that happened a lot. And that I became aware of that back in Haiti, back in the 90s when there was a deployment to Haiti because they thought there might be some Middle Eastern involvement in the big, coup that happened there in the 90s. And everyone got there and there was no food, even though it'd been contracted. So the soldiers are basically stuck with whatever they had in their backpacks.
Wow. Yeah, it's really wild, isn't it? I mean, it seems kind of just so clear that the American war machine, and maybe it's unfair to say just the American war machine because so much of the Western world is actually on board with this. But really, I don't know what the last legitimate war was. I feel like you have to go back probably almost, I don't know, like 80, 90 years. I just can't think of when that actually would be. I think the one that's often used in the UK as being our last, recent legitimate war was Kosovo. But even then, I don't really know much about it. But in your opinion, when do you think things did change in that direction in America? When did you think that America went down a road of these wars being kind of corporate wars as opposed to, legitimate actions to try to better the world?
I think that's a really great question. Never thought about it. If I had to give my opinion on that, thinking about it, I would say if you look at Desert Storm and Desert Shield in the early 90s, that seems to be the crossroads of corporate war sponsorship and the last Cold War. I mean, it was a containment war, so some have called it the last Cold War. Okay. I would say that was a legitimate and very clearly defined outcome and cause. But you did see it was a big advertisement for, weapons manufacturers with the smart bombs and the precision guided missiles. They always showed that one going through the chimney, and who knows? I mean, that could have been anything. That could have been, doctored. But the thing is, that seemed like that's where the turning point seems to be, and that seems to be the turning point for a lot of things in the world. Was Desert Storm, Desert Shield. So that's my opinion. Because if you look at Grenada and those type of skirmishes, they're pretty, they're pretty cut and dry. Like, we got some students, send in the Marines, let's go rescue, that sort of thing. But after that, it gets a bit murky, especially like the Kosovo, Sarajevo, and all those.
Okay, so which kind of countries? I mean, I know that there might be some stuff that you aren't able to divulge, so don't feel free to ignore specifics. But like, which kind of countries were you actually deployed to?
Which kind or which ones?
I guess, yeah. Which countries? Yeah, or which regions?
I mean, I was deployed to over 47 different countries. The thing when you're in special forces units, they don't wait for the big wars. They just send them in wherever they need to go. So everything from exercises and Thailand and parts Korea, different parts of Eastern Europe. Even though I was not in an Eastern European facing group, you do get lent out a lot depending on your skill set. But really all over the place, wherever you could think of something bad happening, usually components of special forces are going to be there, and not to cause the bad thing. And again, not exonerating, but in my time, I never saw anyone get deployed to stir things up. We were usually there to put a Band-Aid on something. So yeah, all over, but 47 countries, and not counting when I did intel work and competitive intel work.
Right. Okay. So yeah, I think that kind of sets the scene definitely in terms of your background, and obviously you have like a lot of experience in this kind of area. So, what was your, I guess, fast forwarding the clock a bit, what was your kind of moment of realizing the world wasn't as it seems? Obviously now you're involved a lot in speaking out, and you're a big part of the freedom movement and all the rest of it. So before that occurred, when was it that things started to change for you in terms of the way you saw the world?
I would say probably 2002, when I was in southern Philippines, and I was watching the news of what was happening, and there was some reporting on where we were as First Special Forces. And I remember a grenade had been tossed in a local theater down the street from us, targeting us, soldiers. And they had wanted posters all over town of like a silhouette of an American soldier. Like, we were worth a lot to the Abu Sayyaf group and the militants. But I remember, I believe it was Fox, CNN. I mean, I think one or both of those, reporting on bombs dropping on us in the southern Philippines. And at the time, I was getting ready to do my set on a karaoke machine with the Filipino soldiers. I'm looking around and I'm saying, bombs. I don't really see any bombs coming down here, but it was a way to keep it going. Yes, there were attacks, but it wasn't like, shrapnel was raining down on us. That's when I started seeing it. And then really going into the intelligence agencies and seeing the way the world was reporting on us, like in one particular agency, and I can't specify which ones because it's contractually illegal, for 75 years. So in 75 years, I could tell you, but the way they talked about the agencies and what they're doing and everything, I'm like, well, that's not really logical. Or when they would talk about intelligence contractors, having a wild West world and we could do whatever we want. And I was like, well, I can't sneeze without going through a client's lawyer. Those kind of things. And then, moving forward, I think I always kind of knew the world. There were two worlds. Because I always tell my wife, I say, you were the Eloys, like from the Time Machine, the pretty people up above the earth in the future. And we're like the Morlocks, the intelligence people and the paramilitaries and everything, keeping the gears running for you. But I always kind of knew there were two worlds and also two versions of reality based on whichever media was reporting it.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So that was, what year was that then that this event occurred with this kind of poor reporting of what was going on?
Oh, on the Philippines, I'd say that was 2002, and then in through 2003 to about 2011, during the crux of the war on terror. All sorts of reporting that made no sense. I mean, people were just guessing, or they have sources. There's tons of sources in DC. So anytime a reporter says, oh, I got an intelligence source. Yeah, I mean, man, you could throw a rock and hit someone with a clearance in DC. It's like a clearance for every 2.5 people. But the problem with those sources is there's no way to verify what they're saying is true. And so you get anyone who's talking to the media is probably not a good source because they're probably not operational. But as far as seeing it, I also worked in, I'm going to be careful how I say this, I worked for a long time in managing the perceptions of populations. So a lot of that was not dropping leaflets, a much larger scale, where you're actually changing, your goal is to change the reality of how an entire population sees things. Well, whether like it's, hey, this terror group is actually this, and America is actually this. We're trying to manage that perception, which creates the canvas for active and aggressive propaganda. A great example is the vaccine confidence activities that we saw during the pandemic. And I could put a pin in that if you want to circle back to that. But in what we saw there really quickly as a summary was the brains of this population were broken and just peppered with different realities of like natural immunity doesn't work, or don't get exercise or go outside and you'll stay healthy and safe. I mean, it made no sense. And when I looked at that, I started thinking, and I said to Naomi, I said, this seems really familiar. This seems like a lot of the work I was doing up till the time Osama bin Laden was killed. And I fear that those programs may have been turned over to the HHS when the war on terror kind of wound down.
Yeah, that's interesting. It definitely does feel like we were subject to a propaganda campaign. Now that you mention it, I've never thought of that connection, that probably is what it feels like if you're in a country where you've got some kind of occupation and they're trying to give you information, but it's contrary to your actual experience of the world, but someone's trying to still give you that information to get you to believe it. That is kind of how it would feel, right? Mm-hmm. Like, our basic observations of the world were completely in contradiction to everything that we were hearing, but we were being told, don't worry, like, we've got this, we'll manage the, we'll manage what you think. Don't think for yourself. We'll think for you, and then we'll give you that information. That is exactly how it felt.
Yeah, it is. And I just want to, are you familiar with vaccine confidence activities?
Not specifically that, but it sounds like, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you explain.
I'm sorry. And it could be called something different where you're at or where you're from.
Okay.
But that's a stated propaganda campaign called vaccine confidence activities. So I first came across it in 2021 during the 2021 CARES Act when that was passed. And I was like, vaccine confidence. And then I looked, and that goes back to 2014. But they promote it as marketing, which propaganda, perception management really is marketing. It's the same thing, same idea. But this was, and then if you read a piece of US legislation, I'm sure just like in the UK, you have to actually do the work and go to that bill that this is based on, and this thing that this, because they have all these footnotes. But I followed those, and and I put this out on Twitter, where part of these activities was to actually get the pediatricians and mother groups on board with pushing this vaccine. And even at CDC, they had one where they got the arts involved. So a lot of that graffiti that you see with people wearing masks and everything, that was all propaganda. And it's not a conspiracy theory. It's still on the CDC website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, completely. I mean, there's so much of that stuff that we saw. I mean, we had like influencers we know were getting paid. I mean, some of them exposed it. They'd been offered money. They'd been offered like quite large sums of money to promote the vaccine and to promote, all of this agenda. And some of them, thankfully said no, but there's a lot of them who didn't. And the thing is, it's very hard to tell who took the money and who didn't, because if you're an influencer, a lot of them just bought into it all anyway. So they are going to be out there saying, hey, go and get vaccinated. But then there's a lot of them who probably just got paid, and we'll never know who those people were. And, I mean, certainly in the UK, we had like advertising campaigns that were just absolutely, I'd never seen anything like it. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this, like about half of my audience is British, like from the UK. So like, I think that they will definitely know what I'm talking about here, but I don't know whether you've seen it. There was these like posters, and it said things like "look into his eyes," and it would be like, "Look into his eyes and tell him you did everything to whatever it was," whether it was like whether you've got vaccinated or whether you've worn a mask or whatever. And there were these images, and they were kind of extremely like, they were like red tinted, they were like high contrast. You could see every wrinkle of the person's face. They look. It was just serious, like in your face propaganda. We had an advert as well, like a commercial. I think this one might have been in Scotland, and it literally showed like these particles, and they called them COVID-19 particles, which makes no sense if you know anything about virology. It's not like there's these like COVID-19 particles, and it showed them kind of like rolling in through the windows and stuff. And, like people were talking, and it was like getting on the surfaces. And God. It was almost like those old videos that you'd see for like, like disinfectant adverts or something, but it's like where they show a little thing and someone would
like
wipe
cartoons?
it away. They were literally animated, yeah. It was like this animated kind of the cloud of COVID-19 particles. It was just bizarre. I mean, propaganda just went off the scale. I mean, I'm still kind of reeling from it now. I don't know about you.
Well, the really sick thing about I'm not reeling from it. I'm reeling from how like gullible the smart people are. Like, so we were always taught, I mean, we were always taught, like the left, the liberals, these are your college people, and then the conservatives are largely looked at as the working class, and there's nothing wrong with either one, and may they someday get along harmoniously. But what was really sick about what you're just saying, and we saw similar things with like the superhero be a superhero, get your shot. That's targeting kids. And a really important point of this, and this ties to my belief is that everything is tied to China and everything is being driven by them. It doesn't mean that people here are not complicit, they're taking the money. But when you see things that target children, to me, it triggers my knowledge of revolutions. And communist revolutions have always targeted children. And so I'm not saying that the vaccine was part of a communist revolution, though it could have been, but the methodology obviously was being influenced, in my opinion, by something coming out of China. Even the way they were trying to get everyone in this harmonized lockstep, momentum goes counter to anything in a Western democracy. And I remember talking to my friends saying, who do they think we are? We're not the People's Republic of China. We're not just going to do something because you tell us. But it did feel like the program or the direction seemed very foreign and not really targeted towards a Western audience early on. It seems like it evolved over time, but it does seem like it initially came from something you'd see in the PRC.
Yeah, that's totally true. But I guess like we did see it enacted in the West, and then we saw the West completely just go for these ideas. And, I wonder honestly whether a lot of this kind of culture war and the kind of wokeism stuff, which had been getting pushed for, a good decade prior, like really kind of forced down our throat type stuff. I wonder whether that was kind of teeing us up for this. It was almost just like chipping away at our fundamental kind of, ideas and principles and these kind of like Western ideas of, genuine, things like freedom and meritocracy and all these kind of things, rather than, the idea that everyone should be the same and should own the same and all the rest of it. Yeah. They weren't really kind of like part of the Western ideology, but then we had this chipping away over time. And then, we get to 2020 and all of a sudden we're kind of hit with this thing, which I guess pushed a lot of people over the edge, but there was a lot of people who were just primed for it. They were ready for it. They were ready to have their, I've said this a few times before as well. It was like having their kind of empathy weaponized against them. They'd been taught to say, I'm just going to care about marginalized groups and that's all I'm going to think about. I'm not going to think about rights. I'm just going to think about who is the most marginalized group. And then suddenly, we roll in with this propaganda campaign saying, hey, we've got this new marginalized group. It's the unwell, it's the elderly, it's whatever. It's these people, the vulnerable, who now need protecting. And so many people had been just kind of brought into this mindset of, okay, well, I'm immediately going to jump on board with this campaign because they've been taught for decades prior. Hey, like we're all about this. We're all about the marginalized group.
Yeah, and I totally I agree and hear everything and see everything you're saying. I want to point out that there's a lot of people who are called China watchers or Chinese, China academics, people like General Robert Spalding or Gordon Chang, and to name a few, Sam Faddis. My friend Frank Gaffney, we see wokeism as just Marxism. I mean, if you really line it up side by side, it's just Marxism. They just, the game's the same, but the players change. But it's Marxism. I mean, that's all it is. Or if you look at, a lot of the stuff around race, that's communist revolution stuff. They've just replaced the worker with a race. And, that's not to say racism doesn't exist, but it's not a climate emergency, in this country. And so, and I don't mind saying that. And I challenge anyone who disagrees with me just to bring their receipts and prove me wrong. But the thing is, when you see, you mentioned something really interesting, and that's how there's all these different things happening. And, that really goes into a concept I've talked about called unrestricted warfare, where it's a Chinese kind of unofficial propaganda, what I see as how they're fighting against us and how they've been at war with us, the Chinese Communist Party, not the Lao Beijing or the people. They're in a worse position than anyone. But the Chinese Communist Party is at war with the United States. They're not competitors. And they've stated this many times. And since about 2003, and they follow they seem to be following this doctrine called unrestricted warfare, which the first rule is there are no rules. And the second rule is everything's a battlefield. So they even list them. Society or sociological warfare, psychological warfare, society warfare, cultural warfare. All these things you're talking about fit into that mold. Even illicit narcotics warfare, where they say to flood an enemy's population with a highly addictive, dangerous drug to overwhelm their public health systems. I hear that. I see fentanyl.
When is that something that China have explicitly stated then? Where did you get that statement about flooding a place with illicit drugs?
Good question. It's 1999 is when these two Chinese colonels published something called Unrestricted Warfare. It was published by the People's Liberation Army Press. You can actually get it on Amazon. Now, I don't know if it was leaked from the Chinese Communist Party or what, or they let it out. I'd have to go back and look, but it is available. It's a real thing. It's a real document. It is translated. But what that is the entire concept of unrestricted warfare, which was based on these two colonels' observations of Desert Storm and Desert Shield, where they looked at that, and most historians look at that war as the perfect war. It was done in like 44, 48 days, very few casualties on our side, precision bombs. Well, these two colonels realized the People's Republic of China cannot defeat America kinetically, traditionally. So we need to look at warfare a different way. And they even say something like, the god of war has changed his face. It's very flowery writing. So, bring a cup of tea or coffee and, take it in small chunks. But the concept is this, like, we want to be the global hegemon. We will defeat the people standing in our way mostly are the United States of America. So to realize the Chinese dream, 2049, which is an actual thing. I was reading Xi Jinping's, I forgot what it is. He's got a million books, but I've read them all, where he talks about this. We're going to realize the dream. It's going to be great, and we're going to be at the center of the world. But this all goes into, to get there, unrestricted warfare is a major part of that. Whether it's regulatory warfare, political warfare, elite capture, these kind of things. And we see they're very real, very real.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I've not heard about that, that book or that document that you were talking about. Yeah. It almost reminds me of, there's this kind of Yuri Bezmenov interview. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that you've heard it, and he's talking about, the kind of Soviet, almost like their blueprint. And then you can kind of like see how a lot of that is actually being done in the West now. It sounds like the Chinese equivalent almost.
Spot on. And the part about Yuri that I had never actually seen him or his 60 Minutes specials or any of that till the pandemic. I'd never heard of him. But then, and you realize those are all 1984, which is kind of ironic. But when you see the chart he puts forth, I think it's called the Framework of Subversion or Steps to Subversion. It follows almost precisely what we saw in 2020, where with the end part being normalization of the society that you subverted. And what scares me about that is it's becoming normal to see allegations against the president or his son or some horrible thing that they're doing to the U.S. military. Like, it's not that people aren't taking it seriously, but it's the reason why, like, beating someone up when you're interrogating them doesn't work. You get used to the pain. And what scares me about Western populations right now is I think they're getting used to things just sucking. And excuse my blunt phrasing of it, but it's almost like, and that's part of the plan. You just beat people down till they're just too tired.
Yeah.
What I tell people so they don't get there is go out and find new sources of pain. Go find something new and horrible that maybe you can fix, but remind yourself you're alive. Remind yourself that these things hurt, and remind yourself that these things are not normal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's almost like, as well, part of the whole kind of woke campaign is people feeling some kind of guilt for their background or their heritage or, like where they're from, the country they're from, etc. And this is almost like the new original sin. It's almost like a replacement for religion now is, hey, we've got this original sin. You were born white, you were born male, you were born, American, whatever it might be, kind of, you can just kind of keep changing it out, whoever the person of privilege is at the time. And when you do that to people, maybe people actually, they want the demise of their own country. There's a part of them that's like, I kind of want a destruction of my own country because, it's so bad and it's so evil and it's done so many bad things. And no doubt there are bad things that have happened. The war on terror and some of these like imperialist wars, they're bad, and we should absolutely kind of denounce them and try to do better as nations. But to think that we're like really bad nations and everything that we've done and everything that's happened in our kind of cultural history is just like awful and violent is just a complete, again, it's another inversion. There's so many good things, and many of the best things have come from societies. Things like ending slavery. Who was the first to end slavery? I'm pretty sure it was the UK. I'm pretty sure that happened.
I think it was
in Britain.
The UK. Yeah.
Again, you've got a lot of other countries that carried on slavery, and many countries in Africa continue slavery right up until today. That's still happening, right? And it's been abolished in every Western country. So, to say that we are just inherently evil is, first of all, not true. But I think that saying that over and over again, people maybe, like you say, they just become despondent to your own nation kind of going down a dark path. You say, oh, well, it's not worth defending anyway.
Yeah, and I think, you make a great observation. I think a lot of people do get there. Like, maybe we do, maybe we are horrible. But what I always, and this is why history is so important. And this is why doing the work is so important. Like, thank God we have channels like Rumble and Getter, and where you can see the other sides of things. Epic Times has done great reporting. Yeah. But you have to do the work. Like, I went to a former family member and I asked her, I said, are you aware of what's going on with this? I was picking up my son. And she said, no. I said, where do you get your news? She said, from my iPhone, like the alerts. I said, okay, so you're getting your news from Apple, which that iPhone is mainly produced in China. Or you're getting your news from NBC or ABC or CBS, or they all get news from AP and Reuters. And here's the problem. AP, Reuters, NBC have all signed memorandums of cooperation with Xinhua Newsnet out of China, which is the actual Ministry of Propaganda. It's the official ministry for propaganda. Our major news sources have memorandums of cooperation to coordinate headlines and coverage with our enemy's propaganda ministry. So if that's where people are getting their news, they're not getting news. They're getting fiction. They're getting spin. And that's not to say that, people don't, everyone spins something. It's hard to keep human bias out of news, but this is straight up lying. And so going back to what I was saying, is people have to put in the work and they have to look for the truth. And, sometimes that truth is taking 5 sources and seeing where they all intersect. But I always tell people, go to antique bookstores and get books on history. Don't get anything that was published in the last 5 years. And so one of our favorite things to do when we have time is we'll see an antique bookstore and I scoop up every encyclopedia or history book from around the world that I can. We have a huge library.
That's great. Yeah. Something that I've been into it definitely over the past, probably like 5 years or so, but especially so recently is I never know whether to pronounce it Mises or Mises, but it's like Mises I think it's .org or let me just check it. But this is great. It's got like Mises.org, I think. Yeah. Mises.org, MISES. And it's just full of like really good, it's got like a lot of articles and things on there, but it's also like books, and it's got a lot of stuff about kind of hard money, Austrian economics, it talks a lot about libertarianism. You can get all kinds of stuff on there. And I just really think like reading that kind of stuff, I don't know. It just feels like it's just from a different place. It's just completely, it's genuinely kind of inspired writing. And, and to be fair, I wouldn't say like I read a lot of modern stuff, but you've got to be very, very picky about where you get your stuff. Exactly like you say, like the easy thing, you can almost you go on like Amazon or wherever it is and look up some political books, and you go into the political section, see what it recommends you. Almost all of it you can just immediately just throw out. You have to really dig to find some good stuff. Then again, in my view, I think that everything that's happened recently, since 2020, I think a lot of people have been inspired to start writing now. I'm really dying to read. Is it Michael Senger?
Oh yeah, he's a friend of mine.
He's a friend of. Okay, great. We'll have to talk about that because I'd love to get Michael on the podcast as well. Yeah. But like he's written a book which I'm really keen to check out as well. Like all about the China connection, and there's other people who just. Snake Oil?
I think it's the name something like that. Yeah, Snake Oil. Right. I've read it. It's good.
And I'm pretty sure your wife has also written a book as well recently. Is that right?
Yeah. So she wrote The Bodies of Others, which is really
The Bodies of Others,
a full social critique of that time, from her own experience and our experience, to what she observed and what she saw, and understanding that she's, been around the world, and we spent so many months in Oxford when we were dating and while she was finishing up her thesis. And it's a great book. And it really, I think what it really, and I did some fact checking on it for her, of course. But what really got me about the book was her ability to transcend different social classes and show you the different attitudes based on the social class. So it starts where we're at a pretty rich party, and in Manhattan, where we used to live down in the West Village, and to how it looks on the outside. So between the both of us, and especially with our courtship and getting to know each other, we brought two worlds together in our own household. And so we've both been able to see, what things are like on either side, from the very elite to the very non-elite, but elite in their own right. And how she really shows in that book how the ignorance among the classes of each other was used to manipulate them, especially the way the elite were manipulating, the working class, or for example. So definitely a good book. And I would say that if she wasn't my wife. But this, to me, it was my favorite book of hers that I've read. And she also has another one that came out called the Pfizer Document Analysis. And we could go into that later, but it's basically right now, in the book, there's 69 adverse events reports from the vaccine, which are based on the papers that Pfizer turned into the FDA, that the FDA tried to have embargoed for 55 years. They got them released, and they've been analyzing all of those things.
Yeah. That is all that Pfizer stuff is absolutely crazy. Did the embargo, did it stand, or did it? I thought it got struck down in court.
So I think it's Peter McCullough's group, or a group he was involved with. He's one of the best doctors in the world, who was called obviously a quack after he questioned the vaccine. He's a good friend, and I think he and a bunch of doctors got the Supreme Court, I believe in Texas, to force the FDA to release those documents, because what it is called the post-marketing report. So when a new drug comes on, the company that makes it turns in this post-marketing report and to the FDA. And in that, you have all the adverse events, all the problems, all the good things. It's a big document. It's like, in this case, I think this one's like 55,000 pages. And that's very standard, and it's always public. It's always public. And so for some reason, they wanted to embargo this one. And I think the buried lead here is the defendant in that case was not Pfizer. It was the FDA, our own Food and Drug Administration.
Wow. Okay. So the FDA is doing the bidding of Pfizer completely directly then?
I would say absolutely, and that is more than just opinion. I just haven't seen them dissent on anything Pfizer wants. Yeah. And not to mention Scott Gottlieb, who's on the executive board at Pfizer, used to be the FDA director. Coincidence?
Yeah, well, I think there's a few others like that, aren't there? It seems to be a bit of a kind of revolving door between those organizations.
It really is.
Yeah. So just zooming back out, because I want to get into the China stuff with you, and I'm kind of conscious that we've touched on it a couple of times, but not really gone deep. So if you wouldn't mind, could you kind of go into the WHO and the China connection? Because I heard you speaking on this on another interview that you did. I think it was the one with Man in America?
Seth.
Yeah, I think it might have been that one. And you went into it, and the way that you articulated, China and the WHO and everything that's happening with kind of One Health was just, it definitely kind of like opened my mind to some new aspects to that. So could you just kind of highlight,
sure.
Just give us like your take on that.
Well, just zooming out first, what everyone saw was Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus doing the bidding, it seemed, of the Chinese Communist Party at the beginning of this pandemic, praising them for their lockdowns, praising them for their handling of it, kind of running interference so no one could investigate the outbreak, and then eventually relenting. But then when the WHO relented, they sent in Peter Daszak and the gang, who actually were at the Wuhan lab funding it, to investigate the outbreak. Of course, we know which conclusion they're going to come to, because they don't want to incriminate themselves. And then so there's that. But additionally, the member countries of the WHO, most of them are in the Belt and Road Initiative, which is the big loan program, I guess you could say, for, that's oversimplifying it. But this is when the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese government, lends out massive amounts of money to countries that, I don't know, their infrastructure collapsed, they need some money, it's these massive loans. But there's catches. If they don't make their payments, China can take your airport or your port, those kind of things. So most of the countries in the WHO are already signed on to that. So they're already indebted to China. Now, when we get down into the WHO and what this One Health is, okay, so the WHO currently, and I'm not a WHO expert, but I know enough about this part. I do consider myself a One Health expert as much as one can be. But they've been trying to push forward the WHO, this pandemic treaty. And there's a longer name of it, but it's like CA plus or something. It's two parts. There's an actual treaty that will allow the WHO to essentially become a supranational power to call the next pandemic or global health emergency, decide what that is, how long it lasts, and should that be called, should that be declared, then you fall under the rules of the pandemic treaty if you're a member country of the WHO, whether that's lockdowns, whether that's mass inoculations, who knows, but a big part is surveilling outbreaks. Those rules are all based on something called a One Health approach. Okay, and this is the basic ideology there is man, beast, bird, plant, the environment. Our health is all interconnected, so we should be looked at holistically. That's fine. That's like the 100-year-old definition of One Health, which has been around for a long time. It used to be called One Medicine. But it's changed into this all-encompassing thing saying you have to treat people ahead of time. You have to surveil communities under One Health. You should change your land use practices. You should change your land allocation for equitable outcomes. It's just grown into this huge, it's gone from basically being the 10 Commandments to being a 2,000-page, very, very defined framework, if you will. And I was telling, my friends who were asking about it, I said, this is kind of like One Health used to be like hey, we're America and we're free, like a battle cry. Now it's become, we're America, we're free, and this is how you're going to live your life. And now it has nothing to do with America, but as an example. So the WHO, they're using this One Health framework to basically have power and control over every country. So let me try to put this in. And I do apologize because there's so many definitions coming from the WHO and these international bodies. I think they've intentionally made it ambiguous. But really what it is it's kind of like a pre-installed system of governance. So if there's a pandemic treaty and then they declare a global health emergency, and keep that phrase in mind, it's pretty broad, we automatically go into these One Health-based rules and regulations and laws, if you will, and with no mention of the fact that completely subverts our constitutions, our sovereign systems of governance. There's no mention of that. The WHO has said, no, we're not going to subvert anything. Well, they're right. They're not, because it's already in our governments. We're going to do it to ourselves by accepting this treaty.
Yeah. Okay. So with this, so America's presumably signed on to this, to the One Health treaty.
So the pandemic treaty, it's not that you're signing on, it's that you're not dissenting.
Okay. So basically the dissent would be an exit from the WHO. That
would have to be, well, no, you can dissent on the treaty, but there's,
okay.
if the way it was described, and Dr. Kat Lindley and Noor bin Laden and James Roguski, they're a lot more versed in the actual inner workings. And Michelle Bachmann, a former congresswoman, she's really well versed on the inner workings. I'd say her and Noor bin Laden. But the way, as I understand it, is as long as no country dissents next May when it's voted on or earlier, then it goes through. Boom, we're in this pandemic treaty. Like, for instance, we're under international health regulations now that have been around since 2005. The pandemic treaty is going to expand even those. It's giving the WHO way more power. Like, you've never had this kind of power in one body before. And now that we know the control that the Chinese Communist Party has over the WHO and its member countries, it's almost like China is pre-installing the government that will be there when they waltz in and become the global hegemon and defeat, probably without even firing a shot, these countries.
Okay, wow. That is, that's big. That's really, really big. So I guess, how do you think the actual instructions or these prescriptions for the WHO's One Health Treaty, how is it that gives China any kind of advantage as opposed to just disadvantaging every country all the same?
Well, because first of all, it gives them an advantage in terms of if it goes through. Because let's say you want to control something. Well, you know what? Call a pandemic global health emergency and make sure everyone's locked down. Make sure no one comes out. There's things in this pandemic treaty or in One Health frameworks that talk about gun violence, that talk about racism, that talk about, so anything can be an emergency. So let's go back kinetically. Let's say there's a Red Dawn situation. Like, I don't think that is a reality where they parachute in and take over our country. And again, I don't think that's how anything would go down. I think that would be a failure, but you never know. The thing is, so let's say one country, China, invades. They want the United States to invade the United States. Wouldn't it be great if when they got there, no one has guns and everyone's locked down? It makes it very easy. Because the biggest thing in the military, that when I used to do these exercises in Louisiana, it was called JRTC. We do these, like, it really was terrible because it was hot and very uncomfortable, but we would do these actual wars against a smaller force. And so we were going in there occupying this fake country, but we had real guns and like lasers on our guns so we wouldn't shoot each other. But one of the biggest parts of that was crowd control, controlling the local population now that we've descended upon it, and which is mainly the role of the MPs, but it was a big part of it, like, because it burns up so many resources controlling all this people. Well, why not get a country to do it for you, the host country to do it for you? You save a lot of time and energy. One Health, with the surveillance component, which is a big part of it, as well as this mention of land and food constantly in One Health, controlling food, controlling how food is grown, land reallocation. These things all sound like eminent domain to me. And what a great way to eliminate the risk of people in rural areas who hunt and have guns and are self-sufficient. Well, what a great way to get rid of that threat. Because I'll say this final thing. If I were a hostile nation wanting to invade America, for instance, we have one of the largest standing armies in the world. And I don't mean the U.S. military. I mean armed U.S. civilians makes up one of the largest standing armies in the world if you were going to count it as an army.
Yeah. Do you know what that number is? Do you know, like, what percentage of Americans or what number of Americans are armed?
It varies. It varies because most people own more than one gun. And I think it's done by gun sales. I've heard anywhere from 5 million to 50 million. I think 50 million is probably high. But I do know there was a huge increase in gun ownership from 2020 to 2023, and that's across Democrats and Republicans.
Yes.
But yeah, so it's a very big number, but it also depends on where you live. Like I live mainly in northern New York, in the Hudson Valley, which everyone up here has guns because everyone hunts, and it's remote. I have bears in my. I had a bear steal my garbage can and have a smorgasbord out there in the woods. It's on my YouTube video. It's hilarious. But we have bears and coyotes and, we have wild animals. We also have people. Okay. We have people coming into these areas, being transplanted in these areas. Since this immigration flood, they're being transplanted up here and we don't know who they are. And people don't want to be alone in the middle of the woods at their cabin without some form of protection.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And when it comes to the BLM stuff and everything we saw there, I mean, that I haven't looked too much into it, but it seemed very much like a orchestrated psyop as well. Like, do you know if there's anything related to China there with BLM?
Well, yeah, I would say there's several things. BLM, and I have to kind of couple BLM and Antifa together because they were joined at the hip. I was just looking behind me. I mean, the BLM is like right out of the Cultural Revolution. And so is Antifa, right down to the costumes. The mask. I mean, so many of them had the hammers and sickles on their signs. So what that is in the Cultural Revolution, they went after the revolutionaries at the urging of Mao or the command of Mao, went after entrepreneurs, small businesses, historical statues, history, the arts, schools. They went after all of that because the past needed to be destroyed. That's exactly what we saw with BLM/Antifa. The past needs to be destroyed. The comparisons, it's almost what I'm reading, and I'm constantly reading or rereading about especially the Cultural Revolution, because it's almost the blueprint for what we saw. Now, more to your point, there is an organization I believe it's called Liberty Hill, which is the logistics arm of the BLM. Liberty Hill, the founder of that, and I believe the founder of BLM, but the Liberty Hill founder is a sworn Marxist who I believe may have worked at the Chinese embassy in San Francisco. I also have it on good word that the reason the Houston embassy was closed by President Donald Trump was they had actual People's Republic of China soldiers working in the embassy, coordinating a lot of these protests. And you notice these protests are really coordinated, as you said, but the signs are all the same. The signage is completely the same. And and even Naomi said, she was part of Occupy Wall Street and all that, one of the organizers, I believe. But even she said to me, she's like, one thing about the left, because she's at the time considered herself the left. She said, we're never this organized. She's like, we're passionate, but I've never seen organization like this. And I said, this is military precision right here. This is highly organized. One place I'd say for any citizen to detect is if you want to look at how it was coordinated and harmonized, go to opencollective.com, read what they offer on opencollective.com, and you'll see how you can start a protest from anywhere in the world in America with a subscription-based model, and they'll even provide you protesters, and they'll send your sign designs to the local Kinkos for, printing out so your protesters can get it. Look at it's hashtag SCOTUS6. That was all coordinated on Open Collective, and I'm going to go into that in a Substack, but that's a huge, huge way it was done, and that's scary because they don't care where the money comes from. Anyone can get a membership on opencollective.com or Act Blue or Action Now or any of them.
Wow, that's amazing. I've never heard that. Opencollective.com. Okay, yeah, that sounds wild. I mean, it's like, state-sponsored protests in anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't know if you wanted to see to your dog or anything. If you want to, do you want to take a break for a second?
Yeah, because I think I just have to open the door. I forgot. We're not.
No worries.
Okay, great. I'll be right back.
No, we're good. Yeah, we're good.
The open collective thing's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. I've never heard of it. I'm going to have a look at that.
I actually got hired to do a job on these Supreme Court justice protests. I got hired by a big law firm to look into the Ruth Sent Us thing. And
look into the what?
Have you heard of Ruth Sent Us?
No.
So Ruth Gator Ginsburg, who it's named after, these are the protesters who came out in force after Roe versus Wade was overturned, which is the abortion.
Yes. Yeah.
And you might have seen the Handmaid's Tale costumes, the red cloaks, and protesting. They had I don't know if you're familiar with the Handmaid's Tale, but they had the red cloaks and, the...
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. I didn't actually see anything from the protest, though.
Oh, wow, that's...
I know, I heard of them. I just didn't actually watch any of the footage.
Oh, they were huge. They were outside the Supreme Court justices' houses. One Supreme Court justice, Roberts, I believe, was targeted for assassination by a trans protester, and they intercepted him. The Secret Service did. This guy had knives, guns, and rubber shoes. He was outside the guy's house, all caused by these protests. They were all coordinated on Open Collective.
And did you say you were hired to do something for was it Open Collective? Or?
No, I was hired by a law firm to look into the source of these what they called hashtag SCOTUS 6 protests, these protests against the Supreme Court justices. It was a private law firm in D.C. that's pretty big. I don't know who their client was, but that's what they hired me to do. And it really took me down that rabbit hole, and I couldn't believe it. But the takeaway was this: anyone in the world can, with a few clicks of a button, start some major upheavals in this country especially.
Wow, that's crazy. So if you got enough money, if you're a billionaire, just go on to opencollective.com and start yourself a revolution.
You got $29.99 a month. It's subscription based. Anyone can do it.
But don't you surely you need the money to pay the protesters, right?
Oh, well,
like the people on the ground.
They thought of that too. What Open Collective also offers is fiscal hosting, which is if you want to be a nonprofit, but you're not a nonprofit and you want to collect donations and people want to write those off on their taxes. If you're not a nonprofit, you need a fiscal sponsor. Well, you can pay for that too. Open Collective will be your fiscal sponsor for your cause. And they'll MailChimp out your requests for money and donations. And it's so easy to make donations. And so the donation money, most of the causes on Open Collective are from donations, and they reap the donations.
Wow, Brian, this is really blowing my mind. So wait, okay, how about this then? Why don't we all get on Open Collective? Let's get all of the freedom people on there, and then let's do our own ones. We can use Open Collective. We can get them to put out a campaign.
Thank you, Johnny. I've been telling people this. I'm like, stop whining, stop tweeting, and people are like, how do we fight this? How do we? You nailed it. You nailed it. People have been saying to me, like, how do we fight this? How do we fight this? I'm like, that's the easy part. They've shown you how to fight it. Yeah. They've given you the blueprint. Yeah. Use it. They even have the tools set up. And you know what? You go on there and you just say some name of your cause that won't raise any alarms. I'd recommend you don't go on there and say, Screaming Eagle Liberty Now. They might not accept but just put something very innocuous like, open dialogues, open dialogues, free growth, who knows? But whatever it is, you've nailed it. We have to drain that money, and even if you don't use it to get people on the street, get a bunch of people on there just draining that donation money, putting it towards a good cause, of course, because the people donating normally don't know. But just drain it, because people get sick of donating after a while too. And you can dry up the resources that way. But yeah, I totally agree with you. People should be using it. I've been screaming this. I'm like, stop reinventing the wheel. They didn't invent this stuff. They just inherited a government. That's it.
But then again, I mean, we did see, especially during the Canadian protests, we all tried to use, I can't remember, what was it? Was it GoFundMe GoFundMe, right? And they basically kind of like went against the cause in the end. They tried to seize the money. I don't know whether they did it on their own volition or whether it was a government telling them what to do, but it seems like as soon as we think, well, there's a powerful tool that's in favor of the people now, we can use it. Well, all of a sudden that powerful tool goes away, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, sorry, it works for people of a different cause, but when you guys try and use it, we're going to close you down.
Sure, yes, of course, there are always those couple steps ahead, but I always say this as well. Again, the architecture's there, how to win this, and first of all, it's done at the local level. Whether that's a protest like you just described, and I saw that. But when I was doing counter-stalking for people who were being stalked, I would always tell them, I'm like, the stalker, all of their energy is focused on you. So you have to give that stalker multiple fires, multiple things to focus that energy on. So I think the biggest mistake, and God bless him, I donated, and I was the first to say it out loud, like, come and shut me down. But we have to do these protests and continue to, but we have to coordinate. The biggest problem I see on our side of this fight, and that is the side of liberty and what's good and freedom, and we're not coordinated. They are. And yeah, again, they inherited a government framework, but we are not coordinated. And now you're seeing things on the, let's just call it the freedom side of people like haggling over who's right about some theory. Like, I got attacked and they're like, oh, China's just a distraction, and oh, it's Pfizer's a distraction, and oh, it's the military. I don't care. I don't care why the guy is breaking into my house. I just care that he's breaking into my house and I'm going to stop him. So what I'm saying, the stalker example is, instead of doing a trucker protest and then doing a whatever other protest, these leaders have to get together, these protest leaders, and coordinate and do simultaneous protests, create multiple fires for the apparatus to have to deal with. And you're creating multiple fronts in this battle.
On the subject of protests, what's your views on Jan 6 and everything that happened there?
Oh, I think that was totally orchestrated or allowed to happen. I think there were actual riots. Obviously, I think, look, anytime you get a bunch of people together, regardless of their political affiliation, especially in these heated times, you're going to have some rabble rousers, whatever. But what I really saw there was, and we saw it in real time. My wife was actually on a podcast interview with a gentleman in Canada, and I was doing her lighting and everything, and it's a friend of ours, and he's like, well, forget about us, look what's going on in your capital. I'm like, what's going on our capital? Because I don't know on TV. And I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God. But right away I was thinking, this looks really weirdly fake, like very theatric. And I also noticed too, like, they were showing the same footage over and over, and it's almost like the talking points were there. And I remember early on, and I still have, because I record everything. As an investigator, I record everything. And I remember seeing the mayor of DC turning down the assistance that was offered by the president at the time. And it's almost like they wanted it to, they knew some people were going to show up and probably cause some trouble, but that was happening everywhere. I mean, look at, Antifa counter-protesters, that was nothing new. Of course, there's always a protest at every inauguration. There's always a protest at the Capitol, always. I used to live right down the street. That's nothing new. But this one, they really, really wanted this to go overboard. So to me, it reminded me a lot of what I've seen with other countries where they have a peaceful protest and they insert people in there to make it more violent. And that's what I see the Ray Epps as, is this guy, Epps. I've done some deep research on him. He kind of disappeared for a while. He had some gun charges, but I take one look at that guy and he looks like every single military leader I ever had. The gait, the way he holds himself, the way he talks, but not only that, he did have gun charges. He did have criminal charges in the past that do seem to have just kind of gone away. So at a minimum, I'd say confidential informant turned rabble rouser by the Democrats.
Okay. Yeah. I haven't followed up too much on it, but I know there's a lot of stuff going around, and it just seems very, very strange to me. I mean, I've seen videos of where it seems like doors are being opened for them. It was like they were just given like a free. You know, it's not very easy to enter a building like that. You know, like it's supposed to be one of the most secure buildings, you know, in the entire country, and the ease of which they went in seems very, very.
Did you see?
peculiar.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Did you see the Tucker Carlson videos that he showed?
I think I did see one of them. I'm not sure. Did he do a series or?
It was like 2, and then they shut it down.
Right.
But he shows exactly what you're like. They had all new footage, and this was from, this was released through FOIA, Freedom of Information Act. And you see they're walking the, what's his, I forgot the Buffalo guy.
Yeah.
The shaman there, they're walking him around, like you see a Capitol cop walking him past the other Capitol police who don't even look up, like they're surprised to see a guy wearing buffalo horns. I mean, it reminded me of like someone walking a guitarist to the stage to do his show. Like they didn't even look up. And not only that, they show like, Brian, was it Cesnik? I think the gentleman who died. He was reportedly killed from getting hit with a fire hydrant, and he actually died of a brain aneurysm like 2 days later, which was an ongoing, apparently medical condition he had. And all due respect to his family and the dead, but the video that Tucker showed was. Him walking around after he had been reportedly brained by this fire hydrant. There's just too much. I mean, there's just such a big, I would say, preponderance of evidence that shows that at a minimum, this isn't everything people say it is. It certainly wasn't an insurrection, because it would have been the first unarmed insurrection in history. There was not one firearm confiscated from the January 6th rioters or protesters.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that pretty much is in line with the way that I saw it. I'm kind of at the point now when these things happen, and I don't really have time to like investigate everything, but I just assume that it's bullshit until proven otherwise. Like, there's no point in ascribing any kind of value to this stuff that you see in the news, or saying, well, I'm just going to assume that that's truth. Like, that used to be the way that I did things before 2020, probably. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't know if that came through. She yelled down. Let her know I'm still on.
Is that good?
That's okay. You just got a guest appearance by Naomi Wolf.
Bring her in.
She's good. Let me see. Still on. Okay. I'll say one thing to your point.
Yeah.
You're right, and that's how I look at it. It's all bullshit until, and a good way for people to determine more precisely if news is bullshit. I've come up with this really sophisticated method. If it's fact checked, then go the opposite direction. Yeah.
They're the ones that isn't it? If you see it's been fact checked, you're like, okay, well, I know that one is definitely true. I know that's absolutely true. If it's been fact checked, whatever has been claimed that they're fact checking is true. Now I don't have to spend my time looking into it.
Well, it's also a hot lead. As an investigator, I'm like, that's a hot lead. That's the thing they don't want you to believe, is if it's on fact check, it's an important topic to them. And so fact check away. I love those guys. They've been so useful to me.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about the open collective stuff before. And I think earlier in the conversation, you mentioned about how kind of big tech is all in on this stuff as well. They're very in line with Agenda 2030. Why do you think that is? What are the incentive structures that have led to that?
Money. Definitely money. And I don't see it as, and I don't think you do either, I don't see it as a plan that everyone got together and then executed their different parts. I see it more as opportunism. So, for instance, if you see what has the Biden administration pushed a lot as a result of the pandemic is broadband access for everyone. What has the pandemic pushed? Stay at home. What are people doing at home? They're in front of their screens. shut down toy stores. Naomi covers this actually in Bodies of Others. How in the UK, I believe, some classic toy stores closed, but there was an Amazon code that you could go to buy that same toy.
Right.
Money. I mean, they're making a lot of money on it, plain and simple. And you could just look at the stock charts and see. Now, you bring up an interesting point because I retweeted this out the other day. Do you know there's actually a portfolio of stocks when people are investing in China, and they call them the BAT companies?
No, I did not know that.
Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent.
Okay.
Speaking of big tech. So for them, I think it's all about making money. I even believe everything the Chinese Communist Party does, and they're behind a lot of the big tech, it's about making money. Because people will say, oh, they want to control us. I always say, probably. But why? Why does big tech want to control you? So they can control where your money flows. It's the reason why casinos give their employees free meals. So they sit there, eat a steak, maybe gamble a little. They want to control where the money flows. Plain and simple.
Yeah. Although I do feel like, I don't know, I guess maybe I don't want to get too much into like the ESG stuff, but I do feel like that is almost like a buffer for them so they can kind of do things which are fundamentally kind of nonsensical when it comes to actually earning money, but still get a return on that. It's like, well, we'll put it in the ESG category because like, for instance, like my last conversation I just had, like, I've just had it removed from YouTube. I've got my second strike. So now I'll probably abandon YouTube altogether. Won't put my content on there. I'm sure there's a lot of other people who are just like, well, we're just going to leave it alone. Like there's just so much content now you can't get on YouTube. I mean, it used to be that you didn't need a subscription to anything else. You didn't need to be on any other platform. You could be on YouTube and get everything you wanted. Well, now YouTube's not enough. Now it's like, well, I'll have YouTube if I want to learn something, maybe I want a tutorial about something. I want to learn how to bake a cake, whatever it is. I'll have YouTube for that. But if I want to have any real conversation, anything that's talking about, anything like close to the edge, it's got to be on another platform.
You're right.
Now, I personally think that is tanking YouTube's. I mean, I know that it's hard to tell because YouTube is all part of Alphabet now, and it's kind of a series of companies, and it's difficult to tell how much damage that's doing to them. But there's no doubt in my mind that that's knocked a couple of percentage points, off their stock price, like this year, whatever. Now, but then you've got the ESG stuff, which is like, okay, well, what's the counterbalance for that? Well, these companies just have to say, well, if we're woke enough, then we can at least get the ESG brownie points, right? So it's almost like they're trying to do this weird form of kind of like, maybe similar to China, I'm not sure. It's almost like a state capitalism type idea where it's like, you can have a private company, you can do all this stuff, but we've got this ESG stuff, which, we're going to use that as a way for you to kind of like do what we think is right, do what the centralized kind of controllers, the central planners think is right. And then that allows them to, or maybe not even allows them, maybe it incentivizes them to do things like censorship. I don't know what you think about that.
I've thought a lot about the ESG thing, and in particular Target and Bud Light. And,
so inorganic, isn't it? Like that can't have been like someone sitting down and just making a rational decision. They must have been thinking, we want the ESG brownie points for this campaign.
I think it's that and something else. So what I think, and, we were talking the other day, and I was at my friend's house, Josh, he's a great guy and a great freedom fighter. But he's got this group of us that get together, we talk about all these things, and they go deep. They go into the Rothschilds and everything. I stay here, but, so the ESG, I think that's twofold. And I think this is where everyone has to relearn the term useful idiot. It's a difference between Western and Chinese thought on war. So the Western and the capitalist thought is we're going to make some money off this ESG thing. We're getting funded, because if you make certain ESG points, you actually do get kickbacks. So we're gonna make some money on this. But then behind that, pushing ESG is the Chinese Communist Party to some degree, who they're killing American brands. They're destroying. Target is an American brand. Bud Light is a quintessential American brand. Budweiser. And that's destroying. That's just a continuation of destroying our culture and history. Whereas the useful idiots, the people pushing the ESG on our end and the companies buying into it, they're thinking transactionally. They're thinking in 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 year terms. The Chinese think in terms of dynasties and generations. And so that I think that's what's happening is this unseen hand is pushing these things which are destroying culture and harmonizing the world into a communist mentality where there are no individuals, there are no genders. And again, if you go to the communist cultural revolution in China back in the 60s and early 70s, the whole thing was about severing ties with the parents, which a lot of these, these things you see, these trans initiatives, for lack of a better term, you see where they have programs in some states where the kids don't have to get the consent of the parent to get a transition therapy or worse. That's severing the tie. That is making the state the parent at that point there, which is right out of the pages of Chinese communist history or every communist revolution history. So what do I think about ESG? I think it's a dumb idea for the business because as we've seen, Target lost like billions in market share. Bud Light just got destroyed. I don't know anyone who will drink a Bud Light anymore. And if you go to most gas stations where they sell Bud Light, it's it's a low end beer, but it's an American tradition. No one's drinking Bud Light. And I was actually at a Hell's Angels, it's funny, but it was a Hell's Angels party / baptism for this little baby. Okay, they're great guys and girls in the chapter near me, but they invited us and we went, and they had a cooler full of Bud Light. Someone had brought Bud Light because not everyone's tuned into all these things happening. And one of the guys says to me, this big dude, he's just like, "Hey man, there's no more beer left. Do you think everyone's gonna get mad if I drink a Bud Light?" And I said, "I'd put it in a red cup if I were you." So, but that's,
wow, it's not bad.
Their attempt to change the culture against Bud Light. And now it's like a joke if you're drinking Bud Light. So to your point, it's just like, it's a bad idea for businesses. They say, go woke, go broke. It's turning out to be true. And really quickly, early on, you had said, we were talking about the wokeness and all that. And I got the sense that, and this is probably location, I'm just curious, are you hearing where you're at about the kind of the victories that have happened over the woke culture? Are you hearing about like the Dodgers protests with like the 5,000 Catholics and any of that?
No, I've not heard about that. I mean,
it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like I'm on Twitter and I see stuff, but I wouldn't say that I'm kind of like keeping a close eye on it. But yeah, I've definitely never heard that before. So
they marched.
What's it about?
Yeah, so what happened was the Dodgers versus San Francisco. I think I don't know baseball that well, but it was basically Los Angeles versus San Francisco, which, as I understand in baseball, is a huge rivalry. Sold out stadium every time. My 11-year-old, he was like, "Oh yeah, Dad, of course." I don't know, but what happened was they were doing this Sisters of, I forgot what they're called, but these kind of trans people who dress up as nuns and kind of, in my opinion, really, really insult my faith. I'm Catholic. By doing this parody of the crucifix. I don't really know what they do. I don't want to know, but it was enough to get 5,000 Catholics from all over LA, especially Hispanic Catholics. Huge population of Spanish speaking people down there. Most of them are Catholic. Came out in huge numbers. This is about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and did a peaceful protest around Dodgers Stadium, and then they even did the prayers in Latin, which our FBI has said is, a sign of extremism and, nationalism. And they used to say white nationalism. Well, when they went out there to Dodger Stadium, people didn't go to the game. They protested the whole game. And there's so many Spanish Americans there that they dropped the white nationalism part. They had to, but there were maybe in the entire stadium about 100 some odd people. It was empty, and they shut that down. And that is a huge loss for Major League Baseball. That's a huge revenue source. And to have something like that happen, it really makes them, they're going to have to change gears. Now they'll change gears and hit us with some other direction, but the go woke go broke thing is proving out to be a real thing, because conservatives, and I don't even like saying conservatives, everyone else who's not part of what I think is like 15 to 20% of the people who are in lockstep with these very Marxist totalitarian people, powers that be. Everyone else is just wanting to do their thing, live their life, have a cold beer, and not be propagandized. You can push them and push them and push them, but you're always going to hit that button where you push too far. And in this case here, it's always when they attack children. And, attacking baseball, in my opinion, is attacking children, because that's an American tradition. Take your kid to the game. Or when, they attack, Target attacking, 11, 12-year-old little boys' clothing sections where you can't find stuff for little boys. And I experienced this early on, like, what's going on in Target? When you attack children, it's always a bridge too far. And even throughout history, you never mess with the kids, because that's when really bad things happen, and then it will derail you. And I think that's where they keep making the mistake, is going after the kids. But of course, that's the revolutionary handbook, is to go after the kids. But people are aware of it, and they're fighting back. Just don't mess with the kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw in one of Michael Senger's Twitter threads. He had these pictures there from, I guess it was Chinese Revolution type stuff.
Yeah.
And in the pictures, one of them, and I think he did a little explainer of what we were actually seeing, was like kids, and they had like the dunce cap, which I don't know whether that's where the dunce cap came from, or whether they just kind of like appropriated it. But they were like stood at the front, and they had all the community, and especially the parents. The parents were front and center, and the kid had to basically kind of be shamed by the whole community, and the parents had to watch them be shamed, by the communist kind of leader who was there, because they'd done something that was considered against the cause or whatever. And it seems like China, is one of the only places which has successfully done this. They seem to have, maybe it's not successful because, you don't really know what the population of China think. Most people probably are against that government, but at least they got away with dealing with children in this way, and trying to kind of like, breaking apart families in this way. And that's something that's something that at least I have some hope for, that is not going to happen in America or in the West. I think that there is more of a fight there that we're willing to put up, especially in America. I think it's much more imbued into the history, like family tradition and stuff is very, very strong in America.
Well, I would say really the only difference, I think, between our families and the Chinese families is that they're a closed society. So we don't know, and they don't know. They can't get past that firewall, that Great Wall. But there's a huge tradition of, really tight families in China. And I think that's the reason why it was such a threat to the party, is because those traditions are so tight. And I do think China's having issues. Look, they had issues early on with the one-child policy, where people were, they're killing the girl because they want to keep the boy. Well, flash forward a generation later, there's more men in China than women, and they have a population problem. And so, yeah, I think the families are so tight, and that's why they attack them so much. And I want to say, I think every family is different. Like there's tight families, there's not tight families. But I think for any totalitarian regime, the family is always going to be competition. Because my son comes home and he's like, hey, Dad, they want us to wear Ukrainian colors tomorrow. But I don't know. He goes, I want to wait this one out because this whole thing seems a little shady. And I said, well, son, let's look at the old history books, and let's go back to 2013, 2012, and let's learn about everything we can about Ukraine. And now he's an expert, and he schooled his own principal as to why the next day he wouldn't wear Ukrainian colors. He's like, I feel for the children. He goes, I also feel for the children of those Russian soldiers. He said, but he said, I don't know. He said, how can we run out of bullets if we've given a country $90 billion already? How'd they run out of bullets? Are we sure those weapons are getting to them? And then his principal's like, well, we've been assured. He said, well, my dad showed me the Financial Times this weekend, and apparently about half of them are making it onto the European black market, so I don't think they're getting to them. And his principal called me. I thought he'd be in trouble. He called me in, and he called me in to compliment me, to his credit. And he said it really showed me that we need to maybe put a little more focus on history and contemporary history.
That's great. That credit to that guy. Then was that the head teacher? Did you say?
Like the principal or
like
the dean.
Principal,
and that's outside of Boston, so that's a good sign.
That's really good. That's a humble thing to do. I think like a lot of teachers would have just immediately been like, oh, well, this is a kid, like they're just being disruptive or whatever. And, at best they bring the parent in just to tell the parent, look, they're being disruptive. But to actually kind of say that and say, like, that's great that he's kind of learned about this stuff and he's willing to kind of speak his mind. That's the kind of stuff we should be rewarding in schools, right? Like it's actually just, initiative and like, independent thinking and stuff.
But I agree, but it starts at home. A lot of people say, too many Americans, and look, myself included for a time, we've let the state become our daycare. We've let schools become our daycare. And every parent should be, and, thank the pandemic has some blessings in it. It's like, we would have never known what they were teaching our kids at school had it not gone online. And it took a few parents looking over their shoulders going, hey, whoa, what? And so, but it begins, you want to fight a revolution, you want to fight an evil revolution or fight totalitarianism, start at home, start with your kids, start with your castle, start with your neighbors, get these communities and they start growing. And that's why America and any free country can be so strong, is because we still have communities, which is, of course, why they want to break communities up. It's why they targeted religion during these COVID lockdowns. Those are tough communities, and communities rule over the state every time. So back to the kids, if more kids were going to school and challenging their teachers with some facts that they could source, they could do nothing to our schools. You wouldn't need to be, you need to monitor, but, if the kids themselves are fighting from within and not even realize that they're fighting, kids just like to be right. And it's fun. Like I tell people, it's fun. It's a lot more fun than giving your kid his device so you can work on whatever the hell you're working on. I sit down with my kid now and it's like, and I wasn't always perfect, but I sit down with my kid. We played 6 hours of Risk the other day, 6 hours, and we're neck and neck. The game continues. But while we're doing that, we're watching the history of that country. And it's fun. And kids, and then he's now challenging other kids who they're challenging him back. So they're going home and learning more history. And he's teaching them about sourcing, which he got from me. And of course, Naomi's a stepmom. But, and these kids are all like competing with each other. And they're learning more history than the teachers know. And if we could get those movements going more and more, because pulling your kids out of school is not an option for everyone. Homeschooling is not an option for everyone. So do what you can and make it fun for the kids and turn them into little, those annoying little know-it-alls at school that the teacher has to go home and say, oh, damn, the 11-year-old knows more than me. And I went to Princeton, so that's a counter-revolution that can be of epic proportions if every parent puts in the time.
Nice. Well, since we're kind of talking about solutions, I guess let's start rounding up on that point then. So is there anything else that you would kind of put forward as solutions that individuals can do? Like where do you see the main areas that we can actually put efforts into to kind of try and combat this stuff and to try and build the worlds that we want to see?
The very first thing is limit your time in front of a screen. Limit your time. There's only, look, you don't know if you're putting something on Twitter, Getter, or anything, how many people are seeing it. I could tell you when you talk to people who work all day, they don't know what you're talking about. You can say, oh my God, they indicted Trump, they're like they did. Or they don't know. So what I say is get out in your community as much as you can and save the computer for nighttime or early morning. I recommend nighttime so it doesn't color your day. But to get to the one specific strategy that I'm encouraging everyone to do is get to your town board meetings Now, if you're in a city, get to your precinct meetings and look for new businesses coming in or new initiatives that change access to in natural environments like parks, everything like that, or new initiatives that are going to tear down the World War II clock in your town, and challenge those. Challenge the special use permits. We had a business coming into a small town near us, and they wanted to install some sort of, I don't even get what the business was. It made no sense. But I was so impressed because 20 people from the community who were neighbors to where this business would be showed up to say no at this small town board. And they won. And they said, no, it's not right for us. You know, it doesn't fit. And we're going to say no. And so you stop something right there. And these people, I said, how do you get so many people? They said, because we've lost so much until we realize we need to actually put in the time and come to these meetings. So we don't lose it all. We don't want to lose our land. We don't want to lose our, peaceful environment up here. And these are not rich people. These are working class people who just finished a 9-hour shift and are going to a town board meeting. So you got to put in the work. But town board meetings, looking at special use permits, read your local papers, read your county level papers, and look at the initiatives that are going through, because don't waste time figuring out that Bill Gates is bad. We all know he's bad. There's nothing you could do about that. Figure out how you can affect right at your hometown, because the way the Chinese Communist Party, the way political parties fight, they fight at the local level. And you have to fight them back there, whatever that is. Getting involved in kids' schools, getting on the school boards, take over the school boards like my friends at Moms for Liberty have done. They've done this whole strategy across the country where they're getting people elected onto school boards. But this is really what it means. Like, freedom isn't free. You got to put in the work. You got to put in the work. It's like a garden. If you just, plant it and say, okay, good, we're free forever, you're not going to be. And then the final thing I'd say is, run for office if you can. You don't need to be rich to run for office. You just need people to donate. Hell, you could even use Open Collective if you'd like.
Nice. Awesome. This has been really, really great, Brian. I mean, we got through a lot of stuff. There was still more stuff I wanted to talk to you about. So hopefully we can have another one down the line, but I think that's a good point to round things off here. So just before I round things off, just a message to my listeners, please consider supporting me. You can do that on Buy Me a Coffee. You can go there. There's 3 membership tiers starting at just £1 a month. If you want to just give a small donation every month, you can also give a one-off donation, and you can donate with Bitcoin as well. Just check the links to those in the description. Brian, just want to give you the opportunity as well, just to tell my audience where they can find you and, where they can follow your work, and just any other parting thoughts you have as well.
Absolutely. And thank you. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian O'Shea. That's BrianoShea, SPI like spy. SPI is India. Getter, I am just Brian O'Shea, one word, and that's an I, not a Y. Find me on Substack under Brian O'Shea. My column is called Investigate Everything. And of course, I am now a columnist at dailyclout.io, which is, for disclosure, owned by my wife, Dr. Naomi Wolf. And I have a column called Mostly Peaceful. You can always find me there. And reach out and ask me questions, and I'll always respond. As far as parting thoughts, get to work. Don't wait for the cavalry. You are the cavalry. Cavalry incoming, because you are it. And if you're waiting for people to fix things for you or look into things for you, if you got the time to ask, if you got the time to request, you got the time to do. So we all need to get coordinated while you do it. Reach out to your neighbors, come up with plans, come up with a precinct strategy or a local strategy, and start doing and stop talking.
Love it, Brian. Thank you so much.